Hello everyone, I hope everybody had a great week. So today we're going to be working on putting all these ideas that we have explored in the previous videos together to design a lesson. Since this lesson is online and I don't really have the interaction that I would have if we would have been in person for this course, I feel like I'm going to sound crazy a little bit trying to model this lesson for you in a way that is meaningful or makes sense. So I've been working on this lesson for several days. I hope that you will find some use in it, that the ideas that we've been discussing maybe all come together so that you can start to turnkey lessons for your own classes, for your own students. I'm going to continue this series, this lesson planning series, even after the course is over. So if you want to come in and just kind of look to see if I've uploaded anything else that might be useful to you, if I have any additional resources, please do. It's going to be an ongoing thing. It's my new project, I guess. So trying to figure out how to teach elementary school children mathematics online when it kind of goes against what we know about learning. As I said, this is Lesson Planning 101. We always begin with the Common Core state standards. Unless your school is using something else or you're working in a state that does not require the Common Core, the standards is what drives the curriculum. Not the book, not the tests. We need to trust that the standards were written in a way that if we adhere to the depth and the rigor that the standards were supposed to address, that we are meeting the needs of our children, and our children will be able to have a better conceptual understanding of math, have procedural fluency, be able to problem solve, and all those other things that were discussed in the Adding It Up document. As you work with textbooks, make sure that you don't just trust the activity or the lesson just because it's in a textbook. The textbooks are created to be able to be used throughout the United States, and publishers make their money by being able to offer the same text to a wide range of districts. While they might meet the standards, they might not meet the standards. So it's really up to you to make sure that it's aligned, that it meets the depth and rigor, etc. Also, just because you have been given a textbook to work with, that doesn't necessarily mean that it addresses all the needs in your class. So looking at the textbook thoughtfully is really important because you might have to find other ways to differentiate that aren't necessarily in the text. And also, you want to make sure that when you're working with the textbook, that the way the math is presented in the text aligns with what we know about cognitive development, that there are hands-on activities and it gives students time to reflect on these hands-on activities before they're able to go to the abstract symbolic phase, and that there's an opportunity for students to interact and explore and discover things on their own. So I'm going to go through just some steps to planning a lesson and do the lesson, and then we could go back and sort of deconstruct it and address how I proceeded through the steps and what components of our course that we've discussed thus far have been inserted into the lesson. First, you get your standards and you read the progressions. You figure out which one you're going to address and you write your objectives. You should write your objectives just like we discussed in the assessment video. You want to choose how you're going to assess each one of the objectives. So you've got your standard, you know what you're going to teach. You're going to write your objectives so you know what evidence you're looking for to see if the student met the standard. And then you're going to create an assessment to fit that objective. You might want to consider the assessments that you would do before the instruction, during the instruction, like a formative type of assessments, and then post-instruction assessments, either for formative or summative purposes. All of these should work together to measure the mastery of the topic and the cohesion to other math topics that you've explored. The next thing you want to do is think about how you're going to instruct to support student achievement. So this is when we start thinking about what are the cognitive psychology foundations or developmental foundations. What CRA methodologies are you going to use? How are you going to make this an exploratory type of lesson, like a constructivist type of lesson? Can you do that? And then finally, what are you going to need in order to make this happen? What kind of materials or resources? How are you going to plan for scaffolding for the various needs of your class? What kind of questions do you anticipate having to ask during instruction so that your students are being assessed, you're gathering formative assessment, and then also you're helping your students uncover things without actually doing it for them. My first example lesson is going to focus on kindergarten standards, and this is not my original lesson. I actually got this from the NCTM resources. I thought it was a really great lesson, and I thought it was something that I could try to turnkey into a video/online mode. So we'll see how it goes. If you're working with the Google Slides, and they are in the description box on YouTube as well as in Blackboard, all these slides have links to the various resources I've used. You can just click them from there. They will also be in Blackboard. So first we start with the standards. So the standards I want to address are K.CC.A.3, which is writing numbers from 0 to 20 and represent a number of objects with a written numeral. In this lesson, we're just going to be doing 1 to 10. So this is part of that standard, not the whole standard. This will also address the understand that the last number name said tells the number of objects counted. The number of objects is the same regardless of their arrangement or the order in which they are counted. So we're going to be using Unifix cubes so that students can count them and start to get the idea that when we count some amount, that if we count carefully on a one-to-one basis, then the last number we say is also the total of the objects. That seems like really elementary, but for a child, this is very difficult. This whole idea blows their mind. We're going to be addressing K.CC.B.4.c. Understand that each successive number name refers to a quantity and that it's one larger. So every time we count, that quantity is increasing. And we're also addressing K.CC.B.5, count to answer how many questions about as many as 20 things arranged in a line, array, in different configurations. So if we wanted to know how many things exist in a group, the students would know to count them. If they're counting on a one-to-one basis, then they know that the last number that they say is the mathematics practice standard that I'm going to be addressing, is that students will be able to reason abstractly and quantitatively. That is the second mathematics practice standard. Now that I've decided on my standards, I'm going to go ahead and write out the objectives for my lesson. Now these are some objectives. Usually a lesson has a lot, but these are the things that I'm looking for. Okay, this is to assess. So the first one is given an auditory cue. Students will identify number names by raising their hands or saying the names out loud. And I'm going to be working with numbers 1 through 9 only. Also, given a numeral aloud, students will identify the matching quantity by building Unifix trains or towers. Sometimes they can be called towers. Given a number symbol, students will identify the quantity by creating a Unifix train or tower. Like I said, it can be either. And given a set of objects, in this case we're going to be working with a lot of Unifix cubes, students will identify the quantity by counting the total number of objects. As my assessment, I'm going to be recording which students can identify the names of the numbers when I say it. I'm going to be recording which students are able to match the quantities with the number names. So if I say the number 5 or I show them the number 5, they will create a train that has 5 things in it. And I'm also going to be using an activity sheet that identifies quantities, where students are given a number. They have to color in how many Unifix cubes they have in that number and write the number that have to identify the quantities. Okay, so I want to make one thing clear. This lesson is one lesson in a unit that would address all these different things. We're really just taking time to sort of start to unpack and see where students are having problems, having issues. So the first thing we're going to do is activate prior knowledge, which is looking at the work of Piaget. And we're going to be reading a book that has numbers in the story because I want the children listening for the names of numbers, regardless of in the context that they're used. And what they're going to do is when they hear the number, they're going to raise their hands, or they're going to tell me that I heard this number, right? I heard the number 5, I heard the number 6, whatever it is. And then they're going to write the number in the palm of their hand. With one of their fingers, they're going to make the number 5, or they're going to make the number 2, or whatever it is. Okay? The book that we're going to be reading is called Olivia by Ian Falconer. And then after finishing the book, we're going to introduce the idea of how we use numerals to represent a number of objects we count, and how the last number that we say, or that is stated, is the one that tells us the total number of objects that we counted. If I were reading this book to kindergartners, I would introduce the book just like if we were doing a reading lesson. So I would maybe do an introduction where I'm asking the students to look at the cover. What do you see about the cover? What do you think the story is going to be about? They're going to say things like, I think it's about a pig. I think it's about a little girl, about a girl pig. And then say, or children like to do, what do you think? And they might say, children like to color. Children like to play with their friends. Children like to watch TV, play video games. Children like to read. And then I would say, well, we're going to read this book to find out what Olivia likes to do. And as I'm reading the book, I want you to pay really close attention, because I want you to raise your hand every time you hear me say the name of a number. So let's go ahead and read the book. And every time you hear me read the name of a number, I want you to raise your hand. So let's go ahead and start. So this is Olivia, written and illustrated by Ian Falconer. This is Olivia. She's good at a lot of things. She is very good at wearing people out. She even wears herself out. Look at her at the bottom. Look, she's all tuckered out. She's just exhausted. What kind of things is she doing? She's playing, she's running, she's kicking a ball, looks like she's cooking, doing a handstand. So a lot of the things that you mentioned that kids like to do, that's what Olivia's doing as well. Olivia has a little brother named Ian. He's always copying. So Olivia has a family. She has a little brother, and he likes to copy her. Sometimes Ian just won't leave her alone, so Olivia has to be firm. What did Olivia do? Did she scare her little brother? Do you remember what her little brother's name is? That's right, it's Ian. Olivia lives with her mother, her father, her brother, her dog Perry, and Edwin the cat. We see Mom, it might be here, and we see Dad, and this is Olivia because she likes the color red, and here's her little brother Ian. Her dog is named Perry, and Edwin the cat is right over here. In the morning, after she gets up and moves the cat, she brushes her teeth and combs her ears and moves the cat. Why is she moving the cat? Silly cat. Olivia gets dressed. She has to try on everything. Look at all these outfits. She has a lot of red outfits. On sunny days, Olivia likes to go to the beach. She feels it's important to come prepared. Look at, she came prepared. She's got her little swimming, little floating things for her arms, and she might even have goggles on, and she brought a ball to play with. So that's nice. Now, do you remember what we were supposed to be doing? We were supposed to be listening for numbers. Have we heard any numbers yet? No, we haven't. We haven't heard any numbers. So keep listening for numbers. Last summer, when Olivia was little, her mother showed her how to make sandcastles. Look at her mom. She's showing Olivia how to make sandcastles. Her mom is very stylish. She's wearing all black with nice sunglasses. She got pretty good. Yep. What does that building look like? Does that building look like anything that you've seen? Sometimes Olivia likes to bask in the sun. When her mother sees that she's had enough, they go home. So mom makes sure that everybody's safe, doesn't get too much sun or sunburned. It's a good mom. Every day, Olivia is supposed to take a nap. It's time for your you-know-what, her mother says. Of course, Olivia's not at all sleepy. Look at Olivia. She's not happy. I like her picture that she drew. Who's in the picture? On rainy days, Olivia likes to go to the museum. She heads straight for her favorite picture. Oh, look at her picture. Isn't that interesting? The picture has ballerinas. And look, they take Ian too. Mom and Olivia and Ian all get to go. Olivia looks at it for a long time. What could she be thinking? What do you think she's thinking? Let's look at the picture. Let's see. This looks like she's dreaming. Maybe that she's dancing. But there is one painting Olivia just doesn't get. I could do that in about 5 minutes, she says to her mother. Oh, I see some hands going on. It seems like some children in the class have heard some number names. So let's see if you can listen for that number names. I'm going to read this page again. But there is one painting Olivia just doesn't get. I could do that in about 5 minutes, she says to her mother. Oh, nice. I've got lots of hands popping up. Which numbers did we hear? We heard the word 1, okay? And we heard the word 5. And I'm going to write these down on the board for us to look at. So here's the number 1, and here's the number 5. As soon as she gets home, she gives it a try. Oh no, what is she doing? Oh no, look at her mom. Her mom's not happy, right? Time out. Aw, Olivia's all full of paint and stuff, and she's in trouble. After a nice bath, a nice dinner, it's time for bed. But of course, Olivia's not at all sleepy. Only 5 books tonight, Mommy, she says. Oh, I see more hands. What word did you guys hear? Let's read this page again, and I want you to listen very carefully for the numbers. After a nice bath and a nice dinner, it's time for bed. But of course, Olivia's not at all sleepy. Only 5 books tonight, Mommy, she says. That's right. I saw hands up because we heard the word 5. Is 5 already written on the board? When I've written some numbers down. Does anybody recognize the number 5? The symbol for the number 5? Yes. Is it this one right here? No, you don't think so? Is it this one right here? Yes, that's the one it is. Very good, boys and girls. No, Olivia, just 1. Oh, lots of hands. How about 4? Oh, lots of hands. 2? Lots of hands. 3? Lots more hands. Oh, all right, 3. But that's it. I saw a lot of hands bopping up real quick. Did you hear a lot of these number names? Did we hear a lot? Let's read it one more time. No, Olivia, just 1. Okay, let's look up here. We heard the word 1. Do we have 1 written on the board? Do we have that one written on the board already? Yes, it's this first one right here. How about 4? Is 4 written on the board? No, we've got 1 and 5, so I'm going to go ahead and write 4 on the board as well. 2, let's see, is 2 on the board? Nope, not 2 on the board, so let's write the number 2, nice and neat right here. 3, is 3 on the board? No, it's not on the board. I'm going to go ahead and write the number 3 here. So let's look at the ones we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's count them all together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very good. All right, 3. Uh-oh, which one is 3? Is it this one? No. Is it this one? No. How many of you guys think it's this one? Yay. Yes, that is the number 3. It looks like kind of like a little seagull flying. But that's it. When they finished reading, Olivia's mother gives her a kiss and says, "You know, you really wear me out, but I love you anyways." Olivia gives her a kiss back and says, "I love you anyway too." And that's the end of the story. At this point, I might read the story again and tell the boys and girls that when they hear one of the number names, that they should write the number on their palm of their hand by using their finger so that they can trace what they see on the board, and remind them that the numbers are right here for them to be able to see them. What is that doing? That's activating prior knowledge. It's having them listen to a story as well as listening for keywords. So we're able to start integrating reading and mathematics. Instead of seeing them as two different subjects, they're understanding that numbers are communication, that we use them all the time to communicate, that you can listen out for them, and that, they're just used in everyday life. So after we've read the book, then I would tell the students that we're going to be using numerals to represent the number of objects that we're counting. And we're going to look to see, what does the last number that we say tell us about our objects? And I would invite them to go to their desks or to little small groups where I have already set out some Unifix cubes for them. So what we're going to be starting here is the concrete stage of an exploration activity. And they're going to be using Unifix cubes. I'm going to hold up a number card. So one of the numbers that we discussed, either 1 through 5, or if we've done something like this before, then maybe 1 through 9, or I could use that to differentiate between students according to ability. And I would ask students to display that many cubes. And once they have the correct number, ask students to count aloud as they actually make a train. So let me show you what I mean. So these are Unifix cubes. They might also be called like interlocking cubes. And they snap together. You just kind of put the bottom part of one and it snaps into this pretty easily. They're usually made out of a kind of a pliable plastic. They keep their shape really well. They're very common to find in an elementary school classroom. And they're nice because you can snap them together and you can use different colors, etc. So since we can't use real cubes, what I'm using here is a virtual manipulative, and this is free. I put it in the description box below and also in the resources in our Blackboard site, so that if you wanted to use these at home, you could. For very small children, I would recommend real manipulatives. They need to feel these things in their hands. In the state that education is right now, I'm not sure exactly what the future of that is. When they have done research on whether there is a difference between virtual manipulatives and real manipulatives, there are mixed results. But we're taking an online class, so we're going to just use these virtual manipulatives for now. And these are really nice because all you have to do is like pull one out to have more. And so what I would do is I would set up the children either at their desks or in small little groups throughout the room, and I would give them a little baggie or a little basket with a variety of different colors of Unifix cubes. I would just show them a number, and I would tell them, so you have Unifix cubes in front of you. You have little cubes, and they snap together just like this. You just hold them and you can push and they snap together. And if you want to break them apart, you can just pull at it and they will break apart and you can separate them. So what I would like to do is I would like to show you a number. And when I show you a number and say the number name, I want you to show me what that looks like with Unifix cubes. And I want you to show me that quantity. I don't want you to snap them together and make a tower or a train. I want you to show me how many that is. So let's just say I have the number 4. I show everybody the number 4, and I have a student and she pulls out these 4. right? And I'm going around and checking to see that all students have 4 in front of them. And I would say, this is a great example of what 4 looks like. Can you check to see if your work has this many? If it doesn't, see if you can fix it. What do you have to do? Do you have to remove one? Do you have to put more in? What would you do? Check with your neighbor. Does your neighbor have 4? If they don't have 4, ask them nicely if they can fix it or help them fix it. Okay? Don't be bossy. Ask them nicely if you can help them fix it. So I would go around and make sure that all the children had the same number of cubes. Then I would say, you know what we're going to do is we're going to count our number of cubes aloud. And every time we count a number, you're going to snap the cubes together. So we're going to do 1 cube, 2, snap that together, okay, 3, 4. Let's count it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. What does that number 4 have in common? Okay, and you might get things like, well, we were making 4. 4 is the number we were trying to make. What I want you to do now, boys and girls, is take that same number 4 and I want you to put it together in a different way. So instead of having the colors in this way, I want you to mix up the colors and I want you to put it together in a different order. So I'm going to take away the blue, I'm going to take away the green, take away the yellow, and this is also nice because it has them practicing their colors. And this time I'm going to put it together as green first, and then, so that's 1, and then 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, what is that for? What is that for? I heard that 4 earlier. Children will say, well, that's the number we made. We made 4 earlier. And I can say, well, but this time we put it together differently. Did it change anything? Did it change the number that we got, how many we have? And the children, you know, some of them will say no, some of them will say yes. You just kind of listen to see what they're saying. Go ahead and tear apart your towers. Oops. That's another thing, that the dexterity of a little child is going to be difficult to work with virtual manipulatives. Okay, so now let's see what we can do. This time I'm going to show you the number 2. So I want everybody to show me 2 cubes. And the children will, you know, get together and maybe they will show you this cube and this cube. And you tell them again, check with your neighbor. Does your neighbor have 2 cubes? Check to have someone else check your work. If you do not have 2 cubes and you notice your neighbor does not have 2 cubes, you're going to very nicely say, I don't think that you have 2 cubes. Can you check your work? And discuss with one another. Do they have more cubes? Do they have less cubes? Do they need to put another cube in? Do they need to take one out? And I would go around and check to see what the children have in front of them. And then I would tell them, okay, we're going to make another tower and we're going to connect them again. So here is number 1 and 2. 2. What does that number tell me? Why do I have the number 2? I showed you the number 2. You pulled it apart. You pulled 2 cubes over. You put them together and we counted them and we said 2. What is that all the same? What's all the same all these times? And the children might say, well, we made 2 and then we counted 2. Okay, and what is the last number that we count? Tell us. It tells us how many. Oh, let's see if that works for 5. This time we're going to do 5. So I'm going to have 1. I'm going to do this one is yellow. Come on, little yellow guy. Doesn't want to. Okay, there he is. 2. Do orange, black, and this dark red. Okay. So here are my cubes. Let's count my cubes. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many do I have? Very good. I have 5. How do I know? Yes, because it's the same number I counted. And what number does 5 look like? Can you draw the number 5 in the air for me? Let me see. You go around and you ask the children to draw number 5, right? Now it might be a good time to give each child their own number. So you just make a bunch of cards that have the numbers that you're interested in working with, and you have each individual child make a practice one. So one child might make 3, one child might make 5, one child might make 1, 4. If you're working with numbers that are outside of like 1 through 5 or 1 through 9 or whatever it is that you're working with, hand out those numbers. And then I would invite them to share. I would say, I would like everybody that has the number 3 to come up here with your tower, and let's hold all our towers up next to one another so that they're seeing like they're all the same size. Like 3 is all the same height. It's all the same length. There's no difference. And then if somebody comes up with the wrong amount, we can just use that as a teaching opportunity and say, what about this one? What's the difference? Which one looks different? Let's hold them up. Let's stand them up. Which one looks different? And have the kids help them come up with the words like taller or more, so that they're engaging with this vocabulary. Okay, so that's how I would proceed with the lesson. Throughout the lesson, I might be jotting down notes. I might have a list and just make check marks of the children that seem to understand how to make numbers. Just have the children's names and then the numbers that you're working with and make a grid, and then just check off that these kids are being able to do things. So returning to the Google slide description of this lesson, I'm using the Unifix cubes. I would hold up number cards and ask students to display that many cubes. Once they have the correct number, I would ask them to count aloud as they made the train. I would do this several times so that they reinforce of counting each cube individually and carefully. So making sure that they have that one-to-one connection, that they can only count a cube one time. They have to be very purposeful to find the total amount. And I'm asking them to focus on the last number stated. Perhaps I might even tell the students to say that number the loudest as they're identifying the total amount. And I would just repeat this several times. In this little example lesson that I made for you, I just concentrated on 1 through 5 because it was going to be really long, but you could do 1 to 10, you could do 0 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 15, whatever it is that you're working with, okay? Whatever standard that you want to address. Throughout the lesson, I would be asking guiding questions. So I would be saying, like, what does the last number that we counted out loud tell us? If we rearrange the cubes, will that change that total? No. Now, why are we doing that? Remember, children at that age do not have a sense of conservation. So if we looked at Piaget's stages, children at that age are still struggling with the idea of conservation. Typical tests that we give kids to see where they are in their development is to do things like pour water from a short glass into a tall glass in front of them and ask them which one has more water. Putting coins close together and then putting coins spread out or objects spread out and asking them which one has more. They have not connected with the idea that moving things around does not change the quantity. So actually purposefully bringing the children into this and having them explore is very important. At this point, you're battling against their natural cognitive development, okay, their developmental stages. So we want them to have the manipulatives so they can see things and play with them in different ways. What seems perfectly obvious to you is not obvious to a 4, 5, 6-year-old child. The whole class discussion is a social interaction, giving the children different numbers and having them construct their train. is a safe space. You can always check with children that are having more problems what their answer is and work with them individually before you have them come up and hold up their train. Or you might pick a child and tell them, I want to use your train as an example, and we're going to just compare it and use that to talk about more or less, or bigger and smaller, or longer or shorter. So all these different things can come together. And what we're doing too is we're developing that vocabulary, we're doing a social interaction, we're comparing, contrasting. This is a very rich experience with a bunch of different skills and disciplines that is very natural for a small child to engage in. At this point, after we've done a nice experience here, we've had our story time, we did a little bit of practice, individual practice, we did a whole group situation, I would give the children 2 numbers. And you can use a tiering activity where you have children that are a little bit more advanced would get bigger numbers, and children that are still struggling might have smaller numbers. You could do the representation stage for students that are struggling a lot in a small group. Okay, and basically I'm going to give them 2 numbers and a worksheet. And let me show you what that worksheet looks like. So this is the Building Towers worksheet, and I would give a child a number. So say I gave the number 5 to a child. I would ask them to write the number here and then color the number of cubes that matched that number. Same thing for here. I would tell them, I want you to do the number 2, have them write the number down, or give them cards and have them try to make the number as nicely as they can into the box, and then color the tower to match. Remember, kids that little are not going to be able to read words like write the numeral or color the tower. Like, you want to explain this to them. For very small children, you might have to write their names on here for them. I mean, it just depends on where the children are in their development, in their learning. This last part, draw a box around the tower that has more. How do you know? We didn't do that in this lesson, so I would maybe hold off until the next lesson to come back and revisit this and have them explain this. Now, again, a child that little will not be able to write a sentence here. They're little. So what do we have to do? We have to scribe for them. That's an accommodation that they can use. Even some older kids, you might have to scribe for them or have someone help you scribe for them. In these days, there's lots of different ways that you can make a little sound bite of how they did this. There's the technology for those things, like iPads or whatever have the technology to record how a student achieved their answer. And I would use this as a piece of formative work to drive the next day's lesson. To summarize the learning, I would bring all the children back to the carpet, and I would put a bunch of just interesting objects in front of them. And here I just threw, just got a picture of some dinosaurs because I thought it was cute. I would ask the children, like, if I wanted to know how many dinosaurs were here, what can I do? The children might have started to get to the point where they count them. And say, we count them. And how would I know? If I count them, how will I know? Which number will tell me how many are there? Hopefully they'll say the last number name. This is a really great opportunity to summarize the learning, have a nice little conversation with some very easy words. You can even tell the students, I want you to explain this to me, and I want you to use the word last. Make sure you use the word last when you describe what's happening here. Do all students need to be able to reach this level before moving on? No, that's what differentiation is for. But this is just a nice introductory activity that is meant to have students begin forming connections between a number name, a symbol of a number, and the quantity of a number. And also the idea that the number quantity will not change regardless of how that tower or the order of the objects appear. So I've gone ahead and written out my lesson plan for this. Remember, this is not my original lesson. I actually took it from the NCTM library, and I just kind of modified it for our purposes. Here in the first section, I have my Common Core State Standards, and this is exactly what was in the slide that I created. Here it asked what mathematical practices were aligned with this lesson. It was just MP2. Here it asked for the specific learning objectives. I had already done that and looked at writing these specific learning objectives that were discussed in the assessment. Here it wanted to know what were the standards that are connected to the previous grade and to the grade following. Since this is kindergarten, there is no previous grade to connect to this, but looking at the progressions for first grade, I learned that students are going to be using comparisons in first grade to find differences, and that there is an emphasis on the use of language, especially the word more and the word less, as it becomes more nuanced in grade 1 when students have to grapple with relative questions that aren't necessarily seeking an answer geared towards looking at equivalency. So like Julie has 3 more apples than Lucy. Lucy has 3 less apples than Julie. They mean the same thing. So starting to work with sort of the relative nature of more and less. Just broke down the lesson exactly like I broke it down for you guys. What was the engagement? We read the book. How am I going to engage Piaget's ideas of schema? Used prior knowledge by having the children identify the number names in the story. I could have scaffolded more by practicing counting to 10 together as a group. And other things that exemplify Piaget's work would have been giving the students an opportunity to challenge their ideas of conservation by rearranging the order of the cubes, and then also giving them time to reflect during the representational stage so that they can assimilate and accommodate the new learning. Why is the lesson constructivist? Well, the students are realizing on their own that when they count, if they count with a one-to-one correspondence, that the last number that they count will also describe the quantity. The CRA methods are the concrete using the cubes, and the representational would be coloring. There was no abstract phase in the sense that I didn't teach them how to go to the next abstract phase. Like, they were copying the numbers, but they weren't really like writing any symbols other than that. Now, this is important to note. You do not have to go through all 3 phases of CRA methodologies for this to be a lesson based on CRA methodologies. These stages take time. So you don't want to rush through it just for the sake of getting through all 3. You want to make sure that the students have time to assimilate this learning or accommodate this learning. How will I use Vygotsky's idea of social constructivism? Well, the children would turn and talk to one another. We would also do the whole class activity where they were comparing the towers in the group discussion. And how will I give directions to the students? Because of the children's age and they're not being able to read directions, all directions would have been given orally, and the instructions had to avoid any complex or multi-step directions. Like, everything had to be very clear and concise. The task level was just a DOK 1. The students were just matching and identifying, so there was nothing really complex about it. The children are too young for POLIA strategies, but the fact that they were working in social groups could be a strategy as well. How is this lesson helping with the use of academic language? Well, the students would be asked to incorporate various words into their explanations, and the words emphasized in the activity are right here. And so far as what kind of questions will guide my formative assessment, most of my questions are from a lower level of Bloom's that are just looking to identify and match. What kind of independent practice will they do? They were going to be doing the activity sheet, and that was also an opportunity for them to reflect. And closing the lesson, remember, I brought them back to the carpet and we discussed how we would figure out how many dinosaurs were on the carpet with us. In terms of assessment, how would I measure understanding? 2 ways. First, I'd be looking at the mathematical practices and looking for evidence that the students were able to reason abstractly and quantitatively. So the students should be able to construct the tower to quantify the name or the symbol that they were given. And also the specific learning objectives had an output that I was looking for, identifying number names, etc. For feedback, there's just level 1 feedback. I want to avoid that because we just want to avoid level 1 feedback in general. I would give the students at least level 2 feedback and things like, I like the way you created that tower. What a great example of using math terms. Could you tell us your idea using this word, whatever, right? Using the word less, something like that. How would I encourage the use of academic language in the lesson? Well, I would challenge the students to explain their ideas or their descriptions of their towers by using the math terms that we had identified earlier. If students are at different levels of language acquisitions, depending on the language, you could either use the students' primary language or native language to scaffold. It's just counting in numbers, so most of the time you can figure out how to count 1 through 9 in a different language. That can also be taped. If you have Google Translate, type it in and have Google Translate say it. There's nothing wrong with that. If the student is not used to the typical Arabic characters, you might even be able to find something that has their non-Arabic characters displayed. Okay, and again, I would say use technology. It's not unusual to find iPads at a lot of the schools. You don't need anything fancy. Something that is going to be able to just create a little video to help those students start to acquire knowledge. So as far as differentiating for 2 types of groups, I just concentrated on students with physical accessibility accommodations. And if you had a student that just had really limited dexterity, they would benefit from using larger cubes or maybe cubes that are magnetic. Because the lesson is so multisensory, if you had a student that was hearing impaired, you would have to really be able to determine how well they're able to understand American Sign Language. For students that are just beginning to use American Sign Language, you might just have to focus on the actual signs for the numbers. But if they are more confident with the language, you might be able to help them by giving them a pre-lesson on the language and the signs for the different languages prior to the lesson so that they can go in there with more confidence. For gifted learners, I think this is a really good lesson to be able to tier. If you're tiering for something like this, you can even start to give students numbers that are greater than 10, in which case they're going to need a different type of activity sheet, and you might even want to give them base 10 blocks so they can see what are the relationships, see if they can start to uncover the relationships between place value and the base 10 blocks. As far as theories discussed, we kind of already talked about this, Piaget and Vygotsky. Burns is just having the students understand the process, trying to get them to describe what's happening, using concrete materials to understand place value, manipulatives, etc. Yeah, these are just the materials that I would need. So as you can see, writing out the lesson was not much different than writing out the Google Slides that I used. There was a lot of it that I was able to complete ahead of time. There's a lot of this that you can use over and over again. If you're working on your EdTPA, you don't want to just talk about Piaget and Vygotsky. You need math-specific people. For elementary school, you want to bring up Burns. You want to bring up van der Waal. Okay, you want to bring up Polya. These are key names that makes whoever is looking at your lesson plan for the EdTPA think, okay, this person is well-versed in what good math pedagogy looks like and what has been research-based, and they're incorporating it into their lessons. Okay, that's what they want to see. They want to see that there's this change happening in math instruction from just going from drill and kill to actually exploratory and CRA techniques as much as possible. So just one more thing before we finish up. When you're creating lessons for your school, you should always follow the expectations of your school and what your principal expects of you. While teaching mathematics in this fashion is based on research, and this is the way that I know that I wholeheartedly believe that children learn, you want to be mindful that you don't go against the vision of the school, right? If it's something that you just can't deal with, and maybe that's not the right school for you, but ultimately what you want to do is find a way to use the materials that you're provided and that you're expected to use in some way, and then from time to time try to blend in this constructivist type activity. Maybe you do a constructivist activity once a month. Maybe you'll only do it as an introductory lesson. I don't know. But keep in mind that all the things that are going into this lesson for this course are really attempting to make clear how we are piggybacking on what we know how children learn. And we're using this specifically so that we can get our children ready for whatever future they choose to have. So that's pretty much it for today. All the links are in the description box below, or in Blackboard, or on the Google Slides someplace. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great week. Bye!